All right, welcome. I don't know how many people are out there and broadcasting on both of the YouTube channels, so I'm not sure which one it's displaying to me here. Probably should have brought up the image before I started the show. So yesterday we went live for a little while, and we did some research on where we're at with internet security, lay of the land on the internet, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more again today. And if I can, I really should have done this before I started the show. Anyway, I think we'll just open up the software instead of just the. Oh, there's Tony out there, right on. So I sent a link out to a bunch of people that are in the know and that tech people, so that we can talk about these from people who might have more knowledge of them than I do. But until then, I'll give you my report on what I found. And I guess I'm not even screen sharing yet. All right, I got everything open over here. Now I'll start screen sharing. All right, and if you can still hear me when I do this, let me know out there. But if people show up, great. If they don't, we'll just leave them for just to be on the channels. I'm doing this live on both the big channel and the Gear Websites channel. It'll live on the Gear Websites channel, but I'm going to just kind of do it live on the big channel so people can see it. So to start out with, this is going to be scary and this is going to be difficult, but it's not difficult, and you got to deal with scary stuff once in a while, right? So let's talk about this from the gun website side of this whole thing. Yeah, thanks for the heads up on that, Mule Team. And when we think about this from the gun side of it, you may have gotten into guns because you know somebody. You might have just had some interest in them. Maybe you saw somebody that went to, somebody that went to a shooting sport or is a hunter, and you got into guns from some entry point. And as you became a gun owner, you either, well, I guess if you're listening to this, you are a gun owner and you progressed, right? You maybe you got into handguns and you got into rifles and shotguns, whatever your path was, you explored around in there. And it's like that with anything, right? If you look at something from afar, it might seem complicated, it might seem difficult, it might seem too much to deal with. But like anything, once you walk in and get used to it, you start to get the lay of the land, right? Additionally, you may have got into guns thinking, well, shotgunning is the way to go. I like trap shooting, or I like bird hunting. I like collecting old guns, whatever it is about shotguns you liked. But once you got in there, you started figuring out that maybe self-defense is a great perk of being the Second Amendment. So you started to look around, and since shotguns aren't great for self-defense, you started looking around for the correct tool. So understanding tools, understanding our needs is part of being a gun owner. And there's a certain amount of awareness that just in life, if you've decided to be a component of your own self-defense, you have to have awareness. You have to be ready for a fight when you don't expect it, and you have to be ready for the other side to fight dirty. Well, all of those elements come into play when we start talking about the new environment in 2021, or the complicated environment that we live in 2021. I don't want to say complicated, the complex environment that we live in. I see Tony jumped in. So I invited a bunch of people, and I know this is Martin Luther King Day, so I'm not sure if people are off work or if they have time to do this or not, but I had some time while it's still fresh in my brain from researching it, so we're going live today. But thanks, Tony, for jumping in. I'm not sure. I knew I wanted to invite you because you've got, well, we don't talk enough, and I know you've got a different perspective coming from New Jersey, being a Marine, being a boots on the ground. It's easy to just sit here and watch everybody else do stuff. It's different when you've got to actually be juggling. I can't even imagine what it's like keeping track of all the ranges and all the participants, the people that are interested in attending, plus all your alumni, plus just trying to share it with everybody. So from your position, I'm not sure where, we've never talked about where you're at as far as being a tech guy. I know we've talked occasionally about the tools we use as content creators, but as far as just being a human dude on the planet in 2021, are you comfortable with phones and computers and stuff? Is that a struggle for you? Is our technical environment something that's like you take with ease, or is that a challenge for you?
It's a total challenge for me. It is not my thing. Um,
Okay.
and that's the reason I'm logging in, because I have to depend on guys like you, Artist and Tony, when we were working together, and others to point me in the right direction and tell me what I'm doing wrong. Um, I think it was last year before, someone was hacking my page like every day. They would change my password. And I actually found somebody who told me how to handle that, and told me how to handle that part of my network security. I had no clue. And
All right. That brings up a good like answer, because there's no way to know. We're all coming at this from different ways. I've been in the game for a while, but you know me, it's just like I'm with guns, I am with computer stuff. I'm aware of stuff, and I try to have a big picture so that I know what I don't know. And there's certain things that I'm really interested in and I know a lot about, but most of it I just am aware of. So I don't want to come at this like I'm some sort of security expert or some sort of network analysis or anything like this. But I've been around this stuff long enough to be able to describe it the same way as if I went to a job site, I could tell you what the plumbers are doing and what the carpenters are doing generally. But I'm not a carpenter or a plumber, right? So I want to bring that first off. That's the way we're looking at this. And the people I've invited, I suspect, are in different versions of similar situations. They might be experts on an angle, but there's a lot we're going to talk about. So that's why I wanted to bring in an assortment. Clover just jumped in. We're not going to spend too much time introducing people, but there's a lot to dive into. But this first disclaimer here, I'm going to spend the first couple of minutes while people show up and the audience shows up. There's a lot to keep track of. We're going to approach it today. On Mondays, I'm going to break this up and go into it, offer sessions like this going forward. It's tough. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. I don't want people to get freaked out. But just like if someone were to sit down with a new gun owner and start saying, there's revolvers, there's derringers, there's black powder, there's high power long range stuff, there's bipods, there's materials that you make frames out of, there's 80%ers. We could go nuts with a new gun owner, right? Overwhelming them. So I don't want to overwhelm anybody. I'm not an expert, but remember that you know a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff. This is just something that we kind of have to learn so that we're not overwhelmed, so that we are not the victim of someone who knows a little bit about something else and uses that knowledge against us, right? So this isn't going to be an in-depth study. There's lots of places online you can find more research on this, but I do want to try to hit everything on this version of an infographic that I came up with over the last couple of days of research, just so that we all know there's a lot to keep track of and a lot to deal with all of this. So before we jump in, Clover's jumping in. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, let me find the mute here. Good Lord. Yeah, thanks for the invite, G. Appreciate it.
You bet. And I asked Tony, same question I'll ask everybody that jumps in. Level of proficiency or whatever. Level of proficiency or whatever with tech.
You're talking about mine?
Yeah, sorry. Where are you coming from? Comfortable,
like rating? What type of rating system? I mean, how would I gauge that?
Well, I know it's a tough question. I'm leaving it open, man, so you can talk for a second. But just because Tony was saying that, he's not super comfortable, he's interested,
right.
He depends on others to give him the heads up.
Well, I mean, as most people, are aware with me, they pretty much know this. For those that might not be, I mean, I do have a couple of decade-long background in IT and in tech. So, but you made a great point about a lot of lot of moving parts to whatever the topic might be. So I'm never going to say I'm 10 out of 10, but I would say I'm a pretty healthy 8 or so out of 10 when it comes to proficiency.
Right on. And I'm guessing we're going to talk about some stuff that's new to you too. So I'm hoping you can help everybody with the same situation I'm having where, man, there's a lot of this, but we know a lot of stuff. So let's remember that. And then Gizzard, I don't know if you've been listening, but again, thanks for jumping in and you coming in with some insight and some bunch of resource. Again, tech wise, is this something we all know that you got a tech gig? Your job is a tech job. Is it something that you kind of do because you can, or is it something you're really into?
As far as
just all the nuts and bolts, the geek stuff, the stuff that a lot of people would look at all the tech minutia and walk away from.
This is something I've been into ever since it came around. I kind of got myself self-taught at it because I didn't start out being an IT guy. I don't have any education to do it. That's just something that interested me, and I eventually worked my way into an IT job out at work. So
I'm glad you brought that up because Clover, I'm guessing you could say the same thing, and I can definitely say the same thing. I come from growing up around contractors and guns, right? Like I knew guns and I knew contractors and stuff. I grew up in that kind of background. So whenever I got jobs, it wasn't anything to throw a hammer or know how to measure something or be competent, doing stuff, creating stuff or fixing stuff. So then I fell into that kind of job. And after doing that kind of job with heavy things that hurt on top of buildings, right, that like strained my muscles on top of buildings, I figured out that I could do the same kind of thing inside on a typewriter and get paid way more money and sit inside air conditioning all day. So that's how I got into tech. And then once I figured out the tech ain't nothing except paying a little bit of attention to stuff that some people really can't deal with, and it's not too tough, right? It's just complex, but it's not complicated. I hope I'm using the right words there. So let's dig in. Like I say, I've got a bunch of stuff that I've dug into. We have a bunch of fights ahead of us. We don't get to pick them, right? You don't get to pick when somebody's going to do something horrible. And in this case, we don't get to pick the ways and the methods and the ganging up on us and the overwhelming blah, blah, blah. So I've got a lot of moving parts and my dog isn't feeling well and she sneaks over there and poops if I don't pay attention. So I'm going to be distracted because she's sneaking over there again. So sit down and I'm going to dig in. And you guys, again, feel free to stop me anytime. I'm going to try to do big picture and then we can dig in depending on how much time everybody's got and how much effort. This is going to take a lot out of us, I suspect. As I started digging into this, there is a lot to it. All right, so with that, I'm calling it signals intelligence. I don't know what to call it in communications or what. I'm not trying to make it sound weird. It's just that a more efficient name is signals intel. There's a lot of aspects to this, and of course, we're going to have people that are going to gain and they're going to be okay with just giving you a superficial view. And I'm not trying to make it sound complicated for the sake of complicated, but just for the sake of not being a mechanism and not being a useful idiot or a useful tool for the other side, for the adversaries. We have to understand that there's elements that the analogy of chess and checkers is often used. Don't play checkers when the other guy's playing chess. There's a lot to that with this kind of stuff. So I tried to start out, and if you watch this series, we started out with trying to, I guess I could have opened it. We've been trying to figure out what the playing field is, who the players are, and what the elements of the game are. So we started out with small, like who we are, the individuals, the users, the ways that we interface. So that's our computers and our phones and our different hardware. And then that goes up and it communicates with other things, with languages and protocols and through wires and through providers and all of these different elements and terms, right? How do you deal with that? With some sort of a visualization, with some sort of an infographic, with some sort of a video, or maybe a whiteboard drawing. So in order to get to that end result, you have to start somewhere. And I just started writing stuff down on here. So we have things like computers and phones, the stuff that we start from. We get into the things like the ISPs, the internet service providers, the websites and domain names and that kind of thing. You got your servers and those kind of things. You get into browsers. I think one way that I started to approach this is to add the time element. So most of us started doing this by watching TV, and the TV started talking about the internet, and then eventually we got a computer and we were doing some stuff with disks and software, and then we realized that you could connect it to a modem, and most of us went to something like an AOL or a large destination and then saw the internet from that destination. And then at some point we figured out browsers allowed us to use our internet connection to explore the internet ourselves. We didn't need to hold hands or stand inside of something like an AOL. And we started to explore these websites and these individual destinations on the internet, and they became difficult and they competed with each other because we have capitalism involved in all this. So browsers, the Google and then others, came around to help us decide what to find online or how to find interesting or the useful things online. And then we got to, I don't know, this is like 2000-ish, something like that. When everybody started to leave AOL, you get your social platforms begin at that point with, I don't have them all in here, but your MySpace was the first one, I guess. And then Facebook and YouTube and stuff started to develop. As all of this is happening, our tools, the hardware that we get online with, our computers got faster and better and smaller and more portable. Our internet connections got faster and more decent. We started to carry around phones that were more capable. Our phones became iPhones and smartphones and Androids and all that. So our phones became a whole nother thing. iPads and pad tablets became a whole nother element. So platforming and hosting video became possible because of ability of the hardware, right? I'm stating history, but that's how this image sort of developed. And as I'm thinking of time and the progression of our experience with the web, we also have to deal with us as a species, as a bunch of mammals that live together in this country, right? Dealing with everything we've dealt with, 2 world wars, a civil war. We've just dealt with all kinds of social issues and stuff over the years. So this is all happening in that environment. So we're going from radio, newspapers, to computers and magazines, to books and libraries, to online and web browsers and all this, right? So we've got a lot of stuff happening. And at the same time, these companies are being built by individuals who understand the mechanisms, but then start to realize the effect or the consequences of their mechanisms. Then you have those individuals who leave the companies, right? And then you have the people come in who are the business people who understand what these tools, what these pieces of equipment that these people have created, what they can really do. And these are people that go to school to learn how to manipulate and deceive and just do horrible things. And we've got some interesting dynamics, and it's just getting super complicated, right? So I think that's sort of how it started. And then I started to go in and figure out the places where I was missing, like I didn't know where I had holes, and I started to research. So at this point, like I said, I don't think we don't know what we're doing here. I'm just kind of going through this, and it gets big and complicated here. So at this point, I'm going to go see what the dog is doing and let y'all kind of chime in and see where we're at.
Awesome. Well, somebody, I guess, can take the reins. I can't see. Who do we have in the, on the panel here? Because
Tony Gizzard and you.
Okay.
Yep, I'm here.
Now, is this big enough? Can everybody? I mean, I kind of just was talking and blabbing, mostly not really paying attention to here, but you can see this on the screen.
Mhm.
Oh wait, Tony's not in here. I'm sorry. No, he's in here. I just throw you guys out because when I do this, it just makes it a little bit bigger for people to read.
Right. Well, I didn't know. I mean, if you were going to step away, I mean, it'd be nice to at least kind of know who was in the room. So,
Yeah.
She's sitting here now, so I'm okay. I'm just as scared anyway, you know how it is. Probably say. So, like I say, we've got the platforms. One of the things that got me started with this whole thing is the concept of what do we do with video hosting, right? So I knew that this library thing was a thing, and it's turning into Odyssey. I've been kicked off as a paying member of Venmo. There's this thing called Gab, and then there's other things. So as I started to
Well,
dig in, I started to see just how complicated and how much there is to deal with. Go ahead.
well, what I was going to say is, would it be would it be advantageous? I mean, we certainly don't want to. There's a lot of stuff on that page, right? And we don't want to overwhelm anybody. But to talk about maybe a general progression of how the internet, what it was used for, because it started out simply by just like basically it was a fancy way to fax a document, more or less, right? And then it morphed from there into, it was kind of like a phone book in a way, right? For businesses. Oh, you've got to have a website, but those websites were informational, like, here it is, here's the products we have, here's our store locations.
Emulating catalogs and brochures.
Right. Well, it wasn't even to that extent yet, right? Because really wasn't even any online ordering.
Well, it wasn't a catalog. It just emulated it. It would say, like, here it is, and here's a little description, and go to our store and get it.
Right. But the internet itself was more like a phone book, right? To look that stuff up, and then, or like the yellow pages, right?
Or maybe if you had a good enough connection, you got a picture. But remember the old, like,
right. Well, what I'm saying is
download.
The internet itself was like the big, thick yellow pages, right? And then depending on the company and the money that they spent on their website in relations to the ad, right, in the yellow pages, is how much information you got from that. So if you went to Coca-Cola's website, you might get a totally different, fancier version with more information than the local mom and pop, let's say, jewelry store or something, right? That maybe only has, maybe they have a website with just an address, literally an address and a phone number on it.
No, I hear you. That's right. I'm going to stop you because we're not really talking about history, but you're right. That definitely gets us to here because it gets crazy, and I don't know how long time we actually have. So what we're looking at on the graphic is, and what I explained there is how I got to it. And then I started to do research and started to uncover and discover things. And a lot of these are just opening. These are just doorways that aren't even open yet. Like a lot of these are very deep topics that we could get into and we'll get into on Monday shows. And hopefully Clover will do it on his Thursday shows in some ways. And other people will take some of these challenges because there is a lot. But just like what I was saying before, if you were to sit down and say there's reloading and there's an investment and there's decisions on what's safe to buy, there's different kinds of ammo, there's grips, there's holsters, there's belts for your holsters, there's the leather that you use on your holster, there's how you decide to sew. I mean, there's just, we could go nuts with gun stuff and we deal with it because we enjoy it. This is just one of those things. Like, I'm going to keep using mowing the lawn because I hate mowing the lawn. I literally moved to the desert because I hate mowing lawn. I don't even like smelling mowed lawn. So, there's people that'll just get a lawnmower and there's people that'll go nuts and they'll have like a whole part of their garage or a whole shed devoted to making sure their lawn looks good. And everybody's got the right in a free country to spend as much time or as little time, right? But at the same time, we can put all this information up so when needed, people know where to go grab it, because it's all about knowing your resources. You don't have to be the expert. You don't have to know everything. As long as you know your resources, where you can get stuff when you need it, you become better and more effective at communications, right? And that's what we're trying to do here, is so that you don't become overwhelmed. I got overwhelmed just thinking about how many levels they're going to be attacking us on. And so what I'm doing here is trying to bring people together to offer some reference to how big the playing field is, and to maybe some direction on how to find out what specific thing you might need, because it's all just individual battles. World War II was huge, but individuals fought it, right? Generals paid attention at a big field, but individuals took care of it. No one individual, the accumulated effort of a bunch of them, and we can take care of any challenge that way. We always have. The difference is now we have tools that allow us to coordinate and work knowing what the other allies are doing and what our adversaries are doing. And I'm not trying to create a rally call or a system of attack. I'm just trying to offer information for our side so that we know what all the elements are in play. So with that, I'm not going to dig too much into else, like whether we got to where we are. We have a lot of elements. We have the platforms, and that's all the social garbage that they want us to pay attention to. Hardly that's annoying because it deals with the way that we're all mad at each other, or not. But that's just the surface, and that's only the what am I trying to say? Like the mushroom that we see on the surface. All this other stuff is what's happening underneath, and a lot of it could be overwhelming. There's a lot to it, but we need to start figuring out what it is so we can team up on it.
I think a more appropriate analogy, if you're going to use the botanical or the vegetable, whatever, it would be like a carrot, right? It's like you see the plumage, you see the leaves, you see, but underneath that could be a baby carrot, it could be a big, huge carrot. Who knows, right?
Oh yeah, this time in case it's something big, it's a whole bunch of potatoes down there.
Yeah.
We got our social platforms, and that's the easy part. So if you're overwhelmed by that part, take a break, go get some coffee or something, and come back to this, because that's not even the beginning. That's just the part that we see at the top. You got your audio hosting, insignificant. Clover's done millions of talks about the specifics there, but almost has nothing to do with the fight part we got coming. We got the video hosting. It's going to be interesting, and part of this was created to help decipher that, but we got more at stake. Video streaming, be interesting to talk about that sometime, because that is an element of where it's going. We got instant messaging apps. Included this because we're seeing quite a bit of quit using this and jump to this and this and this, and there's nothing perfect. You can jump to a revolver and it doesn't reload as fast. You can jump to a semi-auto and now it's more complicated in the fight. It won't work when you jam it into somebody's belly. You could go to a shotgun and now you have to deal with pattern. You could go to a rifle and now you got, too much penetration. So there's no perfect stuff, and that's, after digging into this, I've got a little bit more opinion, but mainly just to offer there's no perfect. Speech recognition, those little echo things that people pay for, the voice, every time we use a voice, I'm finding out that is the biggest problem we have as human beings going forward. That's literally one of the most negative things on this whole thing. We've got money, right? In our specific community, I haven't even touched the surface of this one, but we know that we do have a cryptocurrency in the firearms community called Tusk. So maybe we have something. There's a lot, but it's not overwhelming. There are definitely good points. There's silver linings. There's all kinds of good stuff in all of this. And because it's so complicated, remember the other side has to have something like this too. And, there got to be, it's just, it's as complicated for them as it is for us. This is not easy for anybody. Email, again, I can't even touch the surface of email, but there's no easy answers there. Maps and the phone stuff, the Ring cameras, and anonymity is going to be something that we definitely are going to be dealing with. And again, that's what a bunch of this stuff is going to have to deal with. We get into ham radios and alternative conversations and stuff, and real uses of ham. We get into that a little bit. There's a bunch of people that, are going to make money on this situation. We've dealt with this situation in our recent history. And one of the distractions and one of the ways that we don't succeed is when we let people, snake oil salesmen, sell us gadgets and gizmos all along the way instead of paying attention to what the real issues are. And I'm not saying I got the real thing. I'm just saying, hey, there's a lot more going on than just buying a piece of equipment and feeling like we're done. So then we get into internet privacy and internet security, the real meat of all this. All of this was the way to get the pieces, what am I trying to say? Like what do they call them? Chess pieces on the board. But these are the strategies of chess. Like these are the players, and this is what's happening. So we've got security to deal with, and we've got privacy to deal with. And I don't think I'm trying to talk anybody into anything. If you believe that this is all fake, then I'm not trying to change your mind, right? But if you understand that privacy is something that we have to deal with going forward, we've got defensive measures to worry about. We got relationship maps, which is why all of this superfluous or superficial exploration would say, oh, this one's bad, so use this one. No, there's way more to this than simply your choice of chess piece. It's how you play the game. We got facial recognitions. We got the deep fakes coming. We got internet security. So all of these elements deal with how to have privacy or security. And again, this is one step away. It literally is a draft. If I flip this back over, this is still a rough draft. So this is really just notes. But we got things like peer-to-peer encryption. Well, those are two different things. We have peer-to-peer. We have all the other modes. There's many to many. Right now we're in many to many. There's a whole bunch of us in here. broadcasting to a bunch of people. There's peer-to-peer where one person sends to one person. So we have these concepts to deal with. We have encryption, mass surveillance, data collection. There's an anonymity. I can't say that good, but voice print recognition, half of this stuff, and people are going to sell you. And someone who only puts, imagine if someone only put a little bit of effort into it. They went to one class and they were convinced. I'm going to use Glock as an example because there's so many Glock haters who are just like, Glock, done. I hate them, so I can walk away from the conversation, right? Imagine if that person was doing that with this and they were a Zoom hater, or like me, a Facebook hater, right? And blah, 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 everything, blah, blah, Facebook's the enemy of everything. Well, should we take all that for because that's, what did you say? There's no other way to say it. No, that's my opinion on it. So we're going to have the same thing down here with people that are like, oh, use this instead of that. Well, there's things over here that are actually being used. And I'm not here to, like I said, I'm not really trying to scare anybody, but there's things here that default, or what is it, that make useless all kinds of efforts if you're not paying attention. So that's why I call it signals intelligence. Depending on how you feel this is going down in the next while, it's not just a matter of like, what platform can we be on? It's more of, well, there's a lot more to it than that. So that's when we get into the proximity tracking. I don't know if people want to get into stuff like I even have it in here, the ultrasonic tracking. There's ultrasonic emitters that are used for advertising on our phones. In other words, just having stuff like your maps on or internet cookies and stuff. That's just the surface of it all. So I'm not an expert. I wanted to bring some people together to talk about this stuff. I think I've now explained that, I'm not trying to just say, here is a bunch of stuff, and I'm here to explain the difference between Zoom and Google Meet, because I can do that. But I think the real issue here is, how are they using these tools against us as gun owners? And how can we as gun owners, and perhaps people who have some awareness of a bigger picture in the game, like we've been around for long enough, or we know enough people, or we've seen enough stuff go down, that we have some experience with all this, how do we organize, or at least get better at being smarter or efficient to present this to our side and to use these tools instead of just being overwhelmed by them? And I don't know, you guys let me know, did this work at all? Is this, did this, I don't know if I can ask, did this get my point across? I haven't even got into like some of the laws that are it's just like our firearms laws. Like there's some of them that kind of help us and some of them that suck. Sort of like that with digital stuff too. And like I say, I kind of discovered some of this stuff, but I don't, like I said, it's just too complicated. I don't even know how deep to get into this. And some of it definitely seems like tinfoil hat stuff. Unfortunately, it's like not, it's super real.
Yeah, I think the first step is to, when you lay it out in a way that you have here, which it does look overwhelming. It does look super complex, but it is. I mean, let's be honest about it. Not that you can't learn it and take your time and all of that. It's just like, just like anything, right? Just like, learning how to take down that firearm to clean it. I mean, if you're a brand new gun owner, that seems complicated and scary and everything else. But then once you, walked through it and watched a few videos and read your instruction manual or whatever and done it a few times, it's second nature. So, the first thing is don't get overwhelmed, because it's designed to give that appearance, right? One of the things I think is that we've got to get over. There'll be certain people out there they're always this way, that demonize any area, right, of what you're showing a lot of moving parts and a lot of things in this, and there's this, you'll call it a conspiracy play. It's definitely a school of thought that you point to any particular thing on there and they go, oh, they're just out to ruin the country, they're just out to push this agenda, they're just out to do this. And I think that one thing is, when you show the complexity of this, that tends to lead, right? It's like look how complex all of this is. How can that one be how can all the cards be
Look at
stacked
any
against us?
puppeteer. How can anyone have discovered years ago what we were dealing with today? So anybody who wants to fall back on the easy ass excuse of they're out to get us is not a fighter. They're not fighting because this is not something that Facebook is in control of. Well, let's look at the numbers. Facebook isn't in control of anything.
You're
Apple, Microsoft, and Google have already got the $1 trillion mark. The first 4 companies or something in tech to get to the 4 trillion. Google or Facebook's still catching up. But yeah, nobody has control of all of this. This is a complicated thing that the unscrupulous are just using to keep people stupid, right? And keep people unaware because it's so complicated. Don't worry about it. Just log in and calm down.
right,
Anyway.
and you're right. I mean, it's more of an issue, and when they do that, they drastically oversimplify, unfortunately, the situation. And so if you look at it from that standpoint, I mean, you're never going to be able to effectively utilize tools because it's just too simple of an outlook. I think one thing that you go to the money. You're talking about the money. I think that's important. I think that's a play for a lot of these companies that are involved in this, and I think that's a play that that's going to require communication. I'm just speaking from my standpoint and some things I've been doing over the last year or so, is actually talking to a lot of these different companies, these different parts and pieces, and giving them input and educating them. I had a conversation today with a guy, as a matter of fact, and I said, the thing is, I mean, what is often thrown out as bias or whatever is often just it's an education issue. It's an ignorance issue, and so it's like look at take whatever, right? Take a lot of these. Obviously, this is the tech arena. We're talking about the internet. We're talking about IT. We're talking about that sort of thing. So take like CES, Consumer Electronics Show, and I don't know how big that show is. Geez, you probably done the work on that and know where it ranks. But take CES, and so a lot of these companies being in that space, being educated, being familiar, they see how much money it is. They see how many companies there are that's tied into that. They're entrenched in that. They understand it. They know it, right? And so they're not altogether scared of it, right? And then so flip that around and then look at how many of these companies understand the industry side, right? When it comes to firearms, not just 2A rights and that sort of thing, but they don't even understand how big. It's not nuanced. It's not in the dark, bunch of crazy people, whatever. It's a huge industry, and I know you've talked about that before, G-Webs, and they're just so uneducated that they they fall into that rut, right? And so reaching out to these platforms, being present on these platforms and within these companies and utilizing these tools in a responsible, educated way allows us to then maybe open conversations with these moving parts and pieces that, hey, don't fall into this narrative. Not only don't fall into this narrative of guns equals bad because it's incorrect, but don't fall into this narrative because you're going to lose money by doing that. Look at all of the money you're leaving on the table by adopting that narrative. And because with that ignorance, right, a lot of these moving parts, they may say, oh, well, there's a whole lot of risk with advertisers. There's a whole lot of risk with backlash, whatever it might be, right? And so, it's seemingly the popular thing for us to do would be to curtail, to censor, to curb this. Well, if you've got people doing things and firearm owners are the most responsible, or at least one of the most responsible demographics out there, without a doubt, when you've got people that are utilizing these parts and pieces and these mechanisms in that responsible way, and then also those parts and pieces have been educated to the fact that the industry is huge, that it is mainstream, it is not taboo, that if they can make money, then they're not going to pay as much attention to those fringe elements that go, oh, we're not going to drink your coffee anymore. We're boycott you because you showed a gun video or a gun ad, right? They're going to go, well, bye, Felicia, because it's a legal activity. There's millions and millions of people that are enjoying it. It's protected by the Constitution. And so what do you want us to do? Discriminate against somebody? Because we're not going to do that.
So I've been trying, there's a lot of comments. I've been trying to hit the ones that are sort of on point or whatever on the topic, because just ranting for a minute there and then going back to look at comments, everything's, time shifted or whatever. So I figured we'd go for like an hour-ish, however long you guys can stick around. I sent out links to a lot of people that, are in the know or in the whatever the word is, like in the realm. So, let's give them some time to jump in if they want. And I dropped the link to the Patreon. I'm not used to dropping stuff over there. Does that work? I mean, I opened that up to everybody so everybody can see that image. I think that's just the fastest way to get the giant picture out there to everybody. And again, it's not really any rhyme or reason. It's literally just I stuck them in those as I was listening to podcasts and finding pictures and stuff. And so even the order or anything about it is just fairly random. And not much thought put into it. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to have this discussion, is to introduce it. And then the idea is to have subsequent conversations on the more specific pieces, because obviously platforms can take an entire we constantly talk about platforms, right? Video hosting, all these other things. So all of these have much more we could talk about. And I figure having them specialized or focused gives people the ability to go back and find it as a reference when they need it, but also not pay attention to the stuff they just don't care about. Because trust me, I wouldn't care about 99% of this stuff. I'm aware of it, and I've known that it's been bouncing around in my head as I've experienced it or seen it over the years. I have accounts on some of these things just out of reflex or habit sometimes, or curiosity, I guess. So, some of this is just, what do they call it, stream of consciousness almost. So if you have any ideas on how to sort this stuff out, that would be great for this chat. If there's anything that someone saw as we were kind of zooming around on the screen there that you'd like to zoom in on again or talk about, feel free. I don't know how, I'm going to go back to screen sharing so that I'm looking at something and not just talking about some randomness, but there's no the size of these doesn't really indicate much. It was just a way that it started to organize itself. So if there's something here, for example, anonymity or whatever, or this, I'm really worried about this ultrasonic business where our phones can listen to audible things that we humans don't hear. So that means they can send out beacons. They can either put beacons out or set them out in places and do all kinds of heinous stuff by knowing where, when somebody walked past a beacon and what that beacon is told to collect off your phone. There's things that our phones can do. I mean, that we would have in 1984 wishes, he didn't even think about the stuff that we're paying our phones to do. And that's just our phones. Everything is like this. And we walk past, you can't walk without a phone down the street because there's these door cameras that are being offered to basically everybody. What is that, Amazon? The little Ring cameras on doorbells. So you can be without a phone and say, I'm going to live my life as a hermit. And guess what? You ain't a hermit. There's too many phones, and you stand next to somebody who has a phone, and they stand next to two people that have a phone. The internet knows who you were and who you are, where you've been standing. So there's no way to be anonymous. There's ways to screw with the systems, and there's ways to be a dumbass and do stuff that makes you look like a criminal, and then you go to jail for just doing dumbass stuff. So we're not trying to, I don't think there's too many of those. It's just like with guns. I mean, you'd have to be pretty dumbass to do some of the dumbass stuff. You have to be a criminal to do the criminal stuff. But we definitely want to talk about the mechanisms and know the absurdities too. So on the other side, the adversaries are suggesting something that we can say that's absurd and you're being ridiculous, and therefore the rest of your argument must be stupid, right? Some of this gets into psyops and knowing how they're using us and how honeypots and things can be dropped so that they gather info, and there's all that elements to it too. So like I say, we've got a while here. I don't know, there's no rules. So how do you guys want to go? Is there anything that I brought up that you want to reiterate on, or is there some other way to take this that I'm missing?
Hi. I think that it's probably it's good to be wary of what happens with your data, right? And I think that's generally something that should be discussed a lot more. I think the other side of it is that we've seen examples of users gaming the data collection as well. So I don't know if you ever heard the story about the guy who loaded up a wagon with uh, a whole bunch of cell phones with the GPS trackers on for, or like a whole bunch of iPhones.
And it could be a whole bunch of old ones. Like it didn't have to even be good ones. It could just be like old ones even. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he basically he loaded up the his wagon and pulled it along in a city with a whole bunch of phones in it, and because all of these phones had GPS trackers and were all moving so slowly, I think it wound up reporting a traffic jam.
Well, it definitely screwed with everything because the AI wasn't aware of that eventuality, so it didn't know how to deal with it. It thought it was a weird traffic jam with cars on top of each other or something, and that was just to show that we got too much on autopilot, or maybe perhaps that we're relying too much on things that we don't pay attention to, and that's times when you get lazy and you get bit.
Yeah, but I don't think that they're I don't think that they're leveraging it to actively engage in surveillance of people like deliberately. Generally speaking, like the average citizen anyway, we're very far from a 1984 kind of situation in that sense. Like there's too much data for them to possibly go through everything. And so we have in some senses, I think it's important to just put that in perspective compared to, yeah, if someone decided to look into you, if you're on Discord, like it's important to know that Discord absolutely will comply with the FBI, will absolutely hand over chat records. And same for most companies, right? If they get a warrant, they're just going to comply with it. So there's not really much you're going to be able to do communicating online, and that's where communication's happening. So unless you're bracing for the apocalypse, I don't know necessarily want to go.
Yeah, I guess what Walt, I think what Walt is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to try to dumb this down redneck style, is that there's a vast difference between you've done something, drawn attention to yourself personally, and the government is looking into you, versus we're going after all Trumpers, which is millions and millions and millions of people, and it's much more logistically difficult than one going after one specific person, correct?
Yeah. So like if the government wants to dig in on you, they're in your computer as fast as they want to be.
But
like,
they have to have a reason to go after you.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I have concerns about like surveillance state stuff too, right? In theory, they could get a FISA warrant. You have no idea, you have no due process. They just.
But I guess what I'm saying is political opposition is not necessarily. It would have to be. You'd have to draw attention to yourself on a grandiose scale, I would think, to get looked into because of political opposition or something like that, as opposed to some type of potential crime that they're looking into, right?
You'd have to be pretty exceptional. So like the last case that we saw, I think any arguable FISA abuse was probably with Trump.
Right.
And likely during the Trump administration, realistically, there's probably additional FISA abuses. I don't find that process to be constitutional personally, but I think it's just important to know, like, if you're talking about guns online and stuff like that, like they're probably not gonna just be coming after you to go purge you, right? Like the government's not going to be what silences you here. Anyone that silences you is going to be the content platforms themselves. Like Facebook says, oh, if we don't want gun stuff, we can kick it off. Well, yeah, they can do that. So and we should have issues with that. Because of like inconsistent standards that they've had, but I think it's important to just like put that stuff in perspective.
But then not seeing the flip side and the alternative, right? Is they say, well, it's the difference between, the publisher, blah, 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 blah. Well, if they do decide, okay, all these platforms fall under the FCC, then you've got certain governmental regulations. Like, for example, you can't do tobacco on, you don't see gun commercials on network television. You've got all of these language, you've got all of these barriers, right? That's rolled up under the FCC. So if they put Facebook, if they put YouTube, if they put this stuff under that, we've got a whole other set of problems.
So you guys are talking about now the idea of this recent situation with deplatforming and now the call for scrutiny on if they're utilities or not. That's not new, and that's a diversion. So that's, in my opinion, bringing it back to guns, very much like someone who does the open carry challenge, or what's that called, where you open carry until you get pulled over, and then you say you're a citizen and you're not going to give them your right, an audit. It's like a open carry audit, and it's like us debating that. So I believe that is a red herring, or that is the shiny keychains that they dangle while they're feeding us the medicine or they're doing whatever they're going to do. So I'm not trying to suggest that you're right. But I think the way to sum it all up is just because they can doesn't mean that they will. However, since they is not always the state, since we're talking about mechanisms that allow an angry 16-year-old kid to be the they, let's talk about how to be aware. So if we're talking about an open carry debate, it would have been different with a lever action and with an HKG3. It would have been different with a Steyr-AUG and with a your grandpa's 870, right? So there's some nuance there, and that's what I'm trying to get at, is that there's some simple things that we can do to be smarter online, and there's some things that we can do to draw attention to ourselves online, right? And then there's some things we can do to be oblivious online, and there's things that we can do to look like a weird hermit online. And when they're looking out at a crowd, like you're saying, who should we be worried about? And there's 3 people acting like a weird hermit and everybody else is acting like each other. There's times when you want to look like a sheep, and there's times when you don't even want to show up on the radar, and looking like a weird hermit is almost never appropriate unless that's necessary for something. And it's easy to be wrong. It's easy to be weird. So what I'm trying to do is offer a method or a methodology to get people to a level of sophistication that we don't look like a bunch of dinguses, and we're not as scared of simple stuff. We're not as scared if someone told you to remove it. I'm going to put it this way. If I said right now, show of hands, who's taken apart a revolver? Not who has, who would right now. I challenge you to take apart a revolver on screen. Who's going to take me up on that challenge? 1, if you've already taken apart a revolver, you might say yes. If you've taken apart a revolver, you might say, that's the last revolver I'm ever taking apart, and I'm certainly not going to do it on screen, because that's like a jack-in-the-box of springs and parts that you don't know how to put back together. You might think, oh, no problem, but then I say you can't watch YouTube to put it back together, or you can't use your manual to put it back together, right? Or you can't go pick up parts that you dropped on the floor to put it back together. There's all kinds of things. So we can be noobs and have the tech used against us, or we can be aware. So I'm not trying to offer like, here's what we need to do to win. I'm just saying, let's look at all the moving parts and not be scared. And we're going to be looking into more of these, each of these, because a lot of these are interesting. But there's some things that we do that, yes, are not necessarily the FBI or the ATF coming to get us, because honestly, very few of, I hope I'm not talking to any criminals, right? We're not, even if they were out to get law abiding, like they're not using these tools necessarily because they're the FBI. They know where you live. They can just go to your house. This kind of stuff is more, let's just be smart and not let a dumb kid or some dumb foreign national use information against us. Let's not let, the Moms Demand use stuff against us. And then just to be knowledgeable about it, you also aren't going to let charlatans and snake oil salesmen scare you into wasting money. You watch certain infomercials that would scare a little old lady who's never stepped foot out of an apartment in a big city about a vehicle or a garden, because you know all about that. And you're like, that stupid tool that you're trying to sell is garbage, but somebody else falls for it. We don't want to be the people falling for the garden weasel, because we know how to work a regular hoe. We know how a shovel works, right? Like we use these internet tools. I just don't want to be the person that doesn't know how to change a spare tire. Anyway, so with that, I don't want to be harping on nothing too much. I just don't want to get too delved into like a specific, and again, I'm not trying to say like, we got to be worried about anonymity, but just know what it means and know there's some settings you can do, or when to leave your phone at home, so maybe they don't know every single thing that happens at a gun show or something. I mean, we can be aware of what's going on. And like Walt was saying also, if their job is to collect a whole bunch of apples and use those apples to wing at us, their robot is told to pick up perfect apples. So if we go around acting like a bruised apple, we don't get picked up, and we're not even a part of that whole situation. And just the knowledge of that, allows us to never look like a target to their simple machines. And being capable now allows us to be capable in the future and pass that technological awareness and capability to our descendants, to the next, right? Somebody has to figure this stuff out. They're using it against us. We're either going to become prey and they have successfully used this against us, or we'll figure out how to defend and we'll offer it to the next gen so that they can do it easier and use these applications to whatever comes next, because these are only mechanisms that are being used at the moment. Okay, so is there anything out here that you guys seen that
Mostly talking about just the
back in the day?
evolution and the changes and whatnot. Yeah.
Well,
And that's the thing. So many of us are tech, we're adjacent to. So I think if we all just kind of threw our abilities into a mix and let people know, like, hey, the same way that if, hey, you need to know about a shotgun, I can tell you I've taken that apart, or I know a guy who has. Oh, you need to know about deep fake, like, what's the implications of when you can go into Photoshop and I can make a version of Walt say whatever I want, like literally have a little Walt puppet saying weird things. Like, what's the implications of that? How do we know that immediately? How do we know from how they're using it if it's deep fake or not? Like, we got things coming that if we're just sitting around going, oh, I want to be analog, that they're just going to plow through us.
Right.
I think personally there's some value in us older folks who've been on the web a while to remember how we got to where we are now and have the memory of how we used to do stuff back in the day, just from a standpoint of being able to fall back on the basics of communication. I think a lot of the newer people who are coming into the internet now are used to, you do everything on Gmail, you do everything on this side or the other, and you forget about all the other ways of doing things. And a lot of them are actually still out there and still available. But I think the important thing is you have to be flexible. You have to be out there on many different places. You have to be able to go many different directions. That's how you keep from being bottlenecked, I think.
Well, and I think that's a valid point, and it extends to a lot of what the newer people that come into the firearms side of things, that come into the 2A, they only remember back to 2016 or 2013 or 2006 or 2004 or whatever, right?
Right.
And so it's a lot of it gets into stressful, like you was talking about, snake oil salesman kind of in a way, because it's like, oh, this has never happened before, it's unprecedented, and this person's doing this or this agency's doing that or this, and it's like, before, for those of us, the old codgers that can remember back before the internet, it's like there was all sorts of unscrupulous, crazy conspiracy things happening throughout the entire history of the country, and it's like, but you didn't have this mechanism called the internet, where you had millions and millions and millions of people actually able to discuss it and throw out different thoughts and different ideas and that sort of thing, right? It brought more people. It first of all, it brought that into the forefront of the conversation, and then allowed people to have a conversation about it. And so I think a lot of times that people forget, and they would be well served by stopping and thinking, okay, have we been through this before? And when we did go through this before, what did it look like, given the frame of reference, given the time frame? Let's go back to, let's say, 86 and the Hughes Amendment in faux pas, right? Okay, what happened then? That was horrible. They killed an entire sector of the industry, roughly, with the stroke of a pen. How was that able to happen? Where was the fight at? Was it the lack of organizational clout, because there wasn't as many pro 2A, pro freedom, pro liberty groups and watchdogs and whatnot as we have nowadays? Was it a lack of being able to utilize the various mechanisms available at the time, which may have been very rudimentary compared to today?
Declining time when sport shooting and hunting were in the decline, and there was no self-defense yet. It was just police and military that were most of the industry at the time. So yeah, they were like, oh yeah, make it tougher for crime, sure.
Yeah, and I was using that example to say that that's a time when, that was a really, really horrible thing. And we hear howling at the moon, absolute craziness now over things that's less of a threat, I guess you could say. And so it's like, I don't know. I mean, where do we find that balance so we can logically walk people through, and how do we learn lessons from the non-technological age that potentially can be applied through these mechanisms, these moving parts you're talking about in the modern age?
If nothing else, we can learn the lesson that there is a mechanism with politics, and that when you slap the representatives and take them out of office, the future representatives remember that. So that's at least one. That mechanism doesn't change probably. But yeah, we can take all the things that we didn't have going for us too. So I guess I'm just going to say, yeah, try to remember the positives and also what we didn't have going for us, and we still managed to do it.
You think back to the mid-90s when I got started on the internet, and I know it existed a little bit before that, but to me, the internet started out as the world's biggest message board, where back in the days, if you wanted to get the word out that you had something for sale, you put it on a piece of paper and you stuck it on a community bulletin board downtown, where people would see it and stuff like that. So it's basically all the same concept. It's just a new way of doing things. But it's all been done before. Maybe not on the scale and the speed that it's being done now. But we're not doing anything new here per se.
So as far as being smart, what we do have is a potential, and it's tough to be, I don't like to call the sky falling, right? But I also don't want to not be paying attention when unprecedented stuff has happened and that has never happened before, by definition. So this whole crazy fake, well, I believe false flag buildup to some narrative that's happening this week has, whatever. Like one of the reasons I was putting this all together was to see, are there vulnerabilities? Like, we go, oh, they're going to take us offline. What's the consequences of that? Can they? Well, yeah, pretty effectively. I mean, it is our government, and they do have massive tools. So they have the equivalent of nukes and airplanes on the internet. They have, for example, we didn't get into the laws or whatever, but the 1994 Communications Assistant for Law Enforcement Act is when they basically told the phone companies in 1994, if you keep making things that are different, you got to leave a hole so our old wiretaps can still fit in there, because you can't just rebuild tech around our ability to put a court-ordered wiretap on your phone lines, because we can't know what you're building technologically. And that means that every day, every single app that's made has holes for law enforcement. So there's resources available to people doing illegal things that we would want our law enforcement to have. So anyway, there's a lot to this. Where do we, going forward, I was going to say, is there any priorities, or is there any things that interest people most to dig into? Because obviously we have a buffet here. We could attack some version. We want to hit dessert first. Do we want to take a little bit of everything on the first plate? Do we want to, is there something specifically that you think is a closer threat or a more specific threat? I guess I was saying that, we don't know what's happening here, but I don't think it's possible for them to just clip a switch or two and shut off the internet. I mean, if they did, it would shut off society in a way that would cause weird chaos, right? So I don't want to say that they're not out to get anybody, but they aren't going to just be able to flip two switches and have all of our conversations go offline. But at the same time, it's not like as easy as like, oh, big deal, they took us off Facebook and YouTube and Instagram or whatever, we're effectively all isolated at that point. No one has established alternative means of communication already. So just because it's technically possible to have other ways to communicate, unless they've already been established, it's really difficult to get them going. Like I say, there's different priorities, I guess, different ways to do triage on a giant set of data like this. So is there anybody that's got any requests or insight on, like I say, priorities?
I would just say leverage mainstream platforms as long as you possibly can. Like if you're worried about your
I'm
content,
sorry, I meant strategies of how we should attack going forward to which ones of these to do in what order, not so much individual strategies for themselves, but like
stay focus on the mainstream platforms. Like
okay.
yeah, like so if you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, whatever, keep making your content, right? Like if you're on, like these are big platforms, they have a monopoly on traffic online, so just continue to leverage them as long as you can. You can do backup channels, you can do mirrors, whatever. And if you violate a service agreement, what they're going to do 99% of the time is just take off the account. They're not going to go after you with some legal action, most likely. They're just going to take down content that they don't like. So if you stay within the terms of service and all that, you should be okay. And it really shouldn't be too big of a problem. However, if they do take you off, that adds fuel to the fire for your narrative. All that it communicates with, whether it's big tech or the government, whenever they censor something, they're not saying that what you have to say is bad. What they're saying is that they're afraid of what you have to say. So it gives you ultimately a narrative victory to get removed from those platforms as you shift to other platforms. My recommendation is to stay fairly mainstream. If you were planning something that was questionably legal, that's a different matter. You'd be looking into other things entirely. And I know we don't openly encourage any criminal activity, but yeah, I mean, like if you're comfortable with mainstream platforms, continue to leverage them, continue to get the message out that gets it out to the widest base of people, and that's always going to be the most effective thing you can do.
You're still giving advice to somebody running their channel. I'm asking, when you're looking at this piece of document that I created, and I'm going to be doing a series of projects looking at facets of it, what order should I put those facets in? When I explore things like data collection or mass surveillance versus individual surveillance, or voice print recognition and Wi-Fi triangulation, or the idea that our devices are talking ultrasonically with beacons that are positioned all around, or speaking about which video hosting platform to do next, what the advantages are and the technical differences. I was talking about, like, in that priority, what should we do going forward with these discussions? But we can talk about individuals next. Like, I'm not excluding them. Just saying that's what I was asking. Is I'm looking at this as like a whole lot of stuff, and it's really just a mind dump. As I explored and started to fill in this, I kept finding out information for these other things, and then at some point I just said, okay, stop. I'm gonna at this point get some other people's insight on this. So what's the most important thing? Is it the fact that with GPS and mapping, we're pretty much worse than 1984? Is it with speech recognition? We're not just offering everything for triangulation, but also giving the big companies everything that everything. We're giving them that on their platforms. Like, there's some crazy, horrible stuff in here, and it has nothing to do with the fight that we're in right now, but it's all part of the playing field that we're in, and no specific thing is going to get us, just like 308 rifles aren't going to get us or save us. They just have to be included in the general knowledge of firearms, the same as a 22 short revolver somewhere in there, and a 30-06 lever action fits in there somewhere. So it's some of this stuff I need to address because it's part of it, and some of it I'm anxious to address. I'm looking for some insight on what order, or if anybody's got any specific questions, is something that intrigues them or they have expertise on.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand the question then. I'm trying to like if you had to say like the most important like internet security concern broadly, like that would be data collection.
Okay,
like
so
the odds of like some kind of beacon. And there are devices. There's like the Harris Stingray and stuff. There's stuff that does get used by police departments that can mass collect data. Like basically, it just works as a tower that your phone can pick up. But
the state isn't our only. I mean, who cares? The police has handcuffs.
Right.
The police can only go after what they got a reason to go after.
Not with the Stingray, but that's a different matter entirely.
Whatever.
The Stingray,
I'm talking about doesn't matter. That's distraction. I'm talking about the Bloomberg nut who decides to put a beacon and track everybody. Do we want to be oblivious or do we want to be aware and then use that? Are we going to be the people that just let gun shows be used against us? Or are we going to be the people that are sweeping gun shows and own the spectrum of everything at a gun show? You know what I'm saying? Like how feeble are we? How able are we? And that's just gun shows. You know, when we go to SHOT Show, are we being aware? I know certain people have been. I've been privy to some of it, but I'm not stupid. I'm only privy to tiny little scratches of the surface of what's happening. And I want other people to be aware of some of this. So, and that's just what we're talking about here with like stuff that either phones or spyware can be doing. And that's anyway. So yeah, I hear you with data collection though, but then again, there's data collection. And then what you said, we can game the system. When they're used to just looking out and picking up tomatoes, if you throw an apple in there, you've effectively spoiled the whole time that they've wasted looking for tomatoes. How often do you do that before they stop trying to sniff your tomatoes? Or I don't know if that mechanism exists, but if it is, shouldn't we spend some time to exploring it as a community? Maybe it's not interesting to people. Maybe we have to depend on the people that are super nerded out to this stuff to do it. I'm not all that interested, so I just wanted to bring it up and ask if people have stuff to add or like things that, like I say, to point at first.
I mean, like I feel like a lot of it is just like we have to see specifically what the problems are when they come up. So like let's posit that Bloomberg deploys an Amazon sidewalk and is now searching for anti-gunners and then is going to illegally lobby or petition government agents to do something, or petition tech corporations to remove these specific people that he's going to provide some kind of confidential report on. I feel like that would be almost an absurd level of workaround when he could just go to the platforms and continue to work with them. So like he could go to Facebook right now and say, hey, look, here's a whole bunch of interest we found from marketing on gun stuff, like with existing data recognition or data collection that we could just go after. Like, I don't know that it would posit that we would need to posit additional technology for their use at this point, but I think that that's probably like the biggest, the easiest way for them to go. Like Moms Demand Action, what have you, they're working on controlling the social space and controlling what the conversation is, right? So I like probably what we should be doing is talking with tech and normalizing firearms for society on the whole, and then talking and having conversations with big tech about what we want to do, in particular, because we're customers and consumers of their platform, and because there's a lot of people that are interested in what we have to say. And I think like that's like just being a counter narrative to no, we don't need to be taken off because people are interested and this is totally safe and fine. And when you get to know what we're talking about, it's totally reasonable. You just need to get to know us. I think that's going to be more effective. I don't know that there's, I don't know that we're looking at like a conspiracy yet. But that's my personal opinion. But
no, I don't think it's a conspiracy at all. I agree, and I think it's more of just a big mess of capitalism, just a big mess of consequences to a whole bunch of stuff that either was thought out but not thought out in the chaotic environment it was going to be thrown into, or the unknown future it would eventually evolve into, and we're dealing with that. But like I say, there's too many people that are going to say, "Oh, it's just as simple as XYZ," so ignore it, or call to action, or buy, and then let's move on and watch again tomorrow. And it's not that. It's more of like, oh, this is frustrating, but the big concrete building was just built and it puts shade on wherever we're at here, that didn't have shade before. And how do we deal with that? That's liberty, right? How to work with neighbors and maybe figure out, maybe you pay for a mirror and it's not the same, but it gets the point across. And that's what I'm trying to accomplish, is that this isn't a simple thing. I'm going to add a layer called counter. And I forgot, now that I'm saying stuff, you said it was counter something.
I mean, you could do, yeah. I mean, if you're looking at this from like a military perspective, yeah, you could talk about countermeasures or counterintelligence, things like that. So, like, yeah, you could.
Well, but you said something. I'll have to go back and listen to the recording. But basically, you brought up something, and that we thought of. This was all just like what's working against us. But on the same side, I haven't even thought about, because I'm still developing this. There is the benefits of all of this. And counter message, is that what you said?
Yeah, they're like, we can offer a counter narrative. Yeah.
Counter narrative. Yeah. So like I said, I'm really just trying to keep notes here on what what's the word? What to address later. But that's the thing. And I take that as a valid answer. So thanks. That, again, if something here is an eventuality or a potentiality, that's different than being effective next step. Right. So if an effective next step would be, let's get with whoever is abusing us or being mean to us right now and talk to them in a way that they understand either the money or the whatever is effective at manipulating their actions, that we're better to be here than not. That's all I'm trying to do. And I tried to bring this up because I forgot who started giving credit where it's due, but make this a non-political, take this off the thing, right? Like, this shouldn't be a thing. It should be like convertibles. Like, you can like convertibles, you can not like convertibles, you can own one or not, but it's not like convertibles are Democrat and Republicans only not have, it's none of that crap. It's not like, oh, I can't like you because you have a convertible, even though, we could easily spin it to that if a bunch of people wanted it to be that world. So I think we can effectively work towards that, getting rid of the stigma or whatever the word is, the Overton window. Yeah. Anyway, so I appreciate it. But like I say, I don't want to disregard these things either, because if we don't address them, then one, I won't learn more about some of them. Like for me, I don't necessarily always take my phone with me when I'm doing stuff, but knowing that the Ring cameras, as people paid attention to what these Ring cameras are all about, that's Amazon giving away cameras and having incentives with the cops to make people, to give people incentive to get these cameras everywhere. So that Amazon's basically looking at every street everywhere. You can't even walk outside and Amazon can see you in a Ring. It's basically, what do they call that? Face recognition everywhere. Like, you can't even walk outside and Amazon knows where you are. So you can walk around without a phone naked and they know where you are. So there's only a certain thing you can buy from our store that'll save you from being tracked by Amazon everywhere. By now. Let's see. So it'd be nice if there was a pro 2A Bloomberg. I think that would be the worst thing we could possibly have, because there would be worse than apathy. There would be compliance and some sort of like, they owe us, the rich people. We should have a rich people in our arena and the rich people owe us. And then we wouldn't go like, oh, we didn't do something as a group together, like Save the NRA, a membership organization of 5 million people. We couldn't figure out how to come together and get like a dozen people out of a cheap job or a cheesy job. Like, we'd be going, oh, the pro 2A Bloomberg didn't fight for us enough. And it would be like watching the sports, right? Like, it would just be like, I got this hat on or I got that hat on. It'd be like no ambition or any reason for people to actually do anything, except maybe get paid by the pro 2A Bloomberg. So then you get a bunch of people that are like, I'm good at whatever job and I can, get paid by the pro 2A Bloomberg, and their position is always right. That'd actually be pretty draconian. I'm glad we don't have it, actually. So we're going to be better off in the long run having one against him. What happens when the real Bloomberg is done and he decides it's not advantageous because his legacy isn't going to be what he wanted from this? Or I doubt he cares about his fortune because he's really not spending that much money on it. But I'm sure that we, again, countermeasure, get rid of the how do you say get rid of the advantage for the adversaries? Like, how do you get rid of their legacy? Like, make it unappealing for your adversaries? But if it's unappealing to be like, if somebody wouldn't champion, like I prohibited rights, and that's my legacy, is that I championed against rights. You know what I mean? Like if we change the narrative to where Bloomberg sounds like a dipshit for being pro-gun or pro-anti-gun or whatever the hell he is, you know what I mean? Like then we win, and then we have that win as a group of people, and then we don't have some superhero who then can whatever. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Do we need a pro 2A Bloomberg?
I mean, I'll take all the help I can get, but
Yeah,
I'm not worried about someone emulating Bloomberg's traits. I wouldn't mind pro 2A financial support from like philanthropists, but I mean, philanthropy has its other moral problems, but we don't have to get into all of those. I at this point in the situation, I'm inclined to take all the help we can get. Normally, it's not going to be the billionaire class that wants us armed. So
I would like to see it not in the sense of, because Bloomberg not only is Daddy Warbucks, Mr. Moneybags, he's also the puller of puppet strings, right? And so I would like to see the first part of that, the Daddy Warbucks, supporting monetarily, whatever, but also someone that is open to instead of him pulling the puppet strings on various organizations or entities that he's being Daddy Warbucks for, he's open to realizing that there's various aspects of the Second Amendment fight. There's various aspects of, from social implications to legislative to whatever, and funneling those funds rather than controlling organizations by funneling funds, FUNDS, to was that are specifically doing a specific job in a specifically good job in a specific area of that fight, rather than sort of controlling that narrative, right? I think that's one of the issues that we've seen over the years with the NRA, is that they like to get into the, especially since they've come into the media realm or whatever, is like they try to come in and control a narrative. And I think that that's dangerous when you overlook the individual, and not as in just the individual person, but as these organizations, as these movements, as these groups, as these projects, right? They all have their own tact. They all have their own expertise. They all have their own whatever. And to set up a one big sweeping narrative across all of them, I think is less effective, and it's certainly disingenuous in a way. Did I run Walt off? I run Walt off. He couldn't handle that monologue, I guess.
I think he's not that 2A anymore, but
Yeah.
that'll happen sometimes. It's like when somebody is more 2A, it's like a more absorbent paper towel in the bowl. Like it'll absorb more of the water, more of the 2A out of there.
Right.
Now, I don't know what happened. Either his connection failed or he's big media trying to get us, right? He talked about countermeasures and he was taken out. And again, buy stuff at our store and it'll solve that problem. You won't have to worry about any of this. Buy one simple product, you're safe. So we've been an hour something. We ran at least 2 people out of here. Ran Tony out of here. We ran Walt out of here. So before I run these other 2 out of here, I guess we've definitely given it enough time. I appreciate everybody jumping in. I tried this yesterday, and then no notice on a Sunday. Nobody showed up, but appreciate everybody who maybe had some time off or just some extra time on Martin Luther King Day to put some time into this aspect. Like I said, this will be the first of a group of videos or a series to some. I'm not sure how much I'll dig into it, but it was definitely interesting to me. I'll see if there's others that find this interesting going forward. You'll be able to be part of that by leaving some comments one way or the other. And I don't know, Clover, Gary, you want to plug anything on the way out? Or have any other comments? As I guess I should also say, if anybody else has anything specific, we've just been kind of.
No, I mean I want to say thanks for the invite. Obviously, a lot of great conversation out there in the chat. Still a lot of people watching, but my philosophy is go out on top, leave them wanting more, right? Retire just as soon as you win that Super Bowl ring. That's my philosophy. Yeah, this is a great conversation. I'm looking forward to more with that chart. I'm looking forward to it developing more, to talking about more of the moving parts and pieces, and maybe getting into, and I guess that's a strategy that you've got planned, is maybe to actually dissect some of the individual pieces, so that instead of this overwhelming idea of everything on there, we can sort of pick and choose certain little things and discuss
really
those.
Easier when you just look at this, right? Like, oh, there's just
Sure.
6 things to look at when you're
or if you're just looking at one, or if you're just looking at one host in particular, or one platform in particular, right? Like that, right? Even that zoomed in view. Sure. Yeah.
No, exactly. And that's sort of what, well, I got to figure out the software that does it. I have a piece of software that lets me do this kind of stuff, but it's just easier for me to go in here and do it.
Yeah.
In the software I make it in. But it isn't really good for that. But yeah, that's sort of the point. And that's, I guess, why I ended up putting it like this to begin with. But I don't like it. It doesn't have any, there's no relationship, spatial relationship, and there could be. For something like this, there kind of should be. And I'm not sure what those relationships should be. Just even doing something like this, figuring out, because I thought Facebook was the biggest for some reason. Maybe they were, and I'm just not paying attention to the race. And maybe when
they were at one time,
I looked, they were biggest for a second. But according to yesterday, when I did this, according to 2020, Google and Amazon just flipped over the trillion. Microsoft's been there for a while, and Apple is already at $1.38 trillion worth of worth. And Apple made $260 billion last year. Microsoft made $126 billion last year. Amazon 89, Facebook 70, and Google only made $32 billion. But Alphabet is really the bigger piece, so I didn't bother to get that crazy with just this little chart. But yeah, just
and AdSense, right? I mean,
well, this is Google, so that's YouTube,
so that's everything.
Google, but it's not Alphabet. You know what
so
I mean?
YouTube
is
bigger. So YouTube is included in that,
I think, but that's the thing. I don't know, because as soon as I did this, I'm like, because these things. This is all of Amazon. This is all of Microsoft. Google. So it's not necessarily fair because this shouldn't be Google. Basically, this should be
one thing. Yeah, one thing to keep in mind about Google when you're talking about Alphabet, right? When you're talking about the umbrella corporations over some of these, is that when you talk about YouTube in particular, you're talking about a loss leader. So while YouTube is losing money, how much because of the search engine capability and all the other stuff, how much money is that making for another component of Alphabet? You know what I mean?
That's the scary part. So then as I was researching this, the ham radio stuff came up, which was interesting because one of the people I was watching was like, ham radio is over. Like ham radio is done. And I'm like, that's pretty much what I've been saying, because they have all the potential in the world and they sit there. It's like revolver shooters. They got all the potential in the world. It's basically one of the best platforms, right, for handgun. And then they sit around being content to be like, all right, well, like there's no advocates for revolvers, right? You got Miklik, who's just a weirdo, like show off, right? There's no like competent revolverist running around advocating for revolvery, right? So ham radio is the same way. It's got all the potential in the world, just sits there. But with all y'all coming into ham, maybe we'll figure something out with all the scare tactics and whatnot. You know, I'm sure the ham exploiters are gonna see an opportunity to scare a bunch of gun people into buying ham stuff. So because there's people with raspberries and soldering irons and stuff, maybe we'll see. I already saw a really neat software radio scanner that's just a USB thing. You plug into your USB port and it turns your computer into a ham scanner. So you can scan everything from the police vans to the airplanes to ham to cell phone, everything, like everything. Well, you can't do cell phones because they're scrambled, but you know what I mean? Like all the bands are available through just a little GPS or a little, what do you call it, USB thing that costs $30. So anyway, there's all kinds of neat stuff there, but the speech recognition is like, I had no idea. Like I'm never using this again. I had no idea how bad this stuff was. This is like scary for human versus robot type of scary. Like this is beyond scary. Like some of this stuff, you got to think of like the progression, you know, going back to the time.
You're missing one in that too, because Windows has Cortana.
Oh, it's there.
Right here.
Oh, you got it. Okay, I see it now. Never
How
mind.
about
No,
Alexa?
Well,
Alexa
I put
is
Echo
Amazon.
instead of Alexa because I think it's Alexa's just the name of the Echo. But I don't know. Is it Alexa?
Yeah, it's the one used by Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, and it would come. That icon comes up for both Echo and Alexa. So I
Oh,
went
okay.
Echo
I
because
got
I
you.
think it's Echo is the system, and Alexa is just the name of that one hockey puck. But I don't know because this is the scary part. This is AI, and this is where I think it's scary as a tech guy because it's a lot of like, let's lean into electronics can solve this for us instead of actually knowing the answer. Let's just assume electrics will figure this out for us. I don't want electrics to figure nothing out for me. It's scary. All of this is mainly because it seems like there's a lot of people that go, this is the one to use, and none of these, like none of them are better than. They're all just different. It's literally just like saying calibers. This one, is Night Strike still out there? Mike really hit it out of the ballpark with this. Like everything I've found out about, which is the piece of gun tube that he had a decision to make, I think he went with the right way, personally. And with what little I know, I think we've got a competent motherfucker out here who knew what he was doing. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about in here because it's, again, there's just how this is what we do, right? This is where we hang out. And for years, this is all we had until September 27th of 2019. I wonder why I can remember that freaking day, right? And then we all had to go to the freaking Canadians or Night Strike, basically. So this is an interesting one. There's all kinds of stuff there. I don't know. Maybe we're all biased, but I think that's the future. This, like you just said, crazy. Has anybody got on Gab yet? What's up with Gab being so slow?
Guess I've never heard of Gab.
It's not as good as MeWe. So MeWe's the new one. Like I said, there's all kinds of stuff to talk about there. The money thing is we're about to get crazy with the money thing. So yeah, there's just so much of this stuff and this is just all if this is the checker pieces, or in checkers you just have the piece, right? In chess, you got all these different pieces that can do different things, and they can be used in conjunction with other pieces to create little gambits and little businesses. That's what all this shit is. Like this stuff, when you try to figure out what all these pieces are, it's in the context of what they're doing with them. And that's where, like I say, I'm just repeating myself, I think, at this point. So there's a lot to talk about. We'll dig into it. This is with a big draft thing on it because it is literally just rough draft at this point. This thing is available over on the Patreon, and then I'll probably put it up on YouTube once it's a little more useful because I don't like putting up complete draft, that has no association with anything. All I did is list everything here, really. But we'll have a couple of more of these. If you're watching this and you have some insight, please let me know and feel free to jump in. And if you have questions, that's what it's all about. Because I'm kind of aware of some of this, and I'm running around trying to discover how much of it might be important for all of us. And then I haven't even gotten to trying to prioritize or put it in order. So like I say, I've been asking the members of the chat today if they've got any insight. If you're out there listening and you've got some, let us know. This is something I think that we can easily figure it out together. Just like if we needed to figure out how to take apart Thompson and you hadn't done it before, you could get into a live chat and we could get you through it. I asked earlier if you were willing to take apart a revolver. If you weren't willing to take apart a revolver, if I would have asked, would you be willing if you had a live stream, a bunch of friends and a camera, and I bet everybody would say, yeah, let's do it. So hopefully that's what we'll do, is we'll offer the resources, tools, and insight so that we can all take on pieces of the larger complex and not be an adversary, not be a mechanism for them. Thanks for watching, and we'll be